we might not have ISCOM in Durbanville today, but we've got English. Um, so welcome to our first official service that's in English. That will be every fourth Sunday of the month. This is specially for JP, so that he can understand something. I also heard from some English people that they will be judging my grammar and tenses. So I've got to deal with them. For every tense they find wrong, they will do a sermon in Afrikaans for us. I think it's a fair deal, but we'll do our best. Just quickly for you who don't know, the whole idea of the Sunday service is we've got people here that's English that comes with the Afrikaans spouses and loved ones. And as a church, it's important for us to be inclusive. Instead of starting English service after Afrikaans service, we said, let's give one Sunday and let's do it English. And I will do my best. And hopefully by the end of the year, my English is also better. And JP will understand a lot more. So yeah, today we're continuing with our serious metamorphosis. And I'm finding this series quite challenging on some aspects. And I hope that you do take the time, that study guide that I email and send on the WhatsApp group, to spend some time with that. After the first week, we also shared it in English so that certain people can understand it. And I'm not looking at JP now. JP, you're going to eat me sometime. Okay, the day will come. So we're part of Metamorphosis, and today we're going to talk about obedience, the power of obedience, walking in God's will. So what we're talking about today is at the heart of our walk with God. Obedience. Now, obedience is a word that sometimes makes us feel quite uncomfortable, because we often associate it with restrictions. And part of this whole renewal of our mind thing is also to renew our minds about how we think about obedience. The truth is, obedience to God is not about losing your freedom. It's about gaining abundant life. It's about gaining the life that Jesus promised each and every one if we follow us. If you look at some of the stuff Jesus said, Matthew 4 verse 19, he asked his first disciples to be obedient to something. He said, "Come, follow me," Jesus said. "I will send you out to fish for people." And then in John 14:15, we read Jesus say, "If you love me, keep my commandments." So there's a question about being obedient in his calling and being obedient in keeping his commandments. Obedience is not about following rules. Does any of you have a check mark in your head that you try and tick off every evening, and at the end of the day you decide, okay, today I was a good person? Or maybe you don't do it every day. Sometimes, okay, have I done this? Some people use the 10 commandments for this. Did I murder someone today? Hopefully no one ticks that. Did I steal? Did I take God's name in vain? All that stuff. But it's not about that. Obedience is not about following rules. Obedience is about a relationship. That's why Jesus said, "If you love me." A relationship is about trust. It's about love, and it's about goodness. Think about your marriage. Think about the relationships you're in, friends, family, maybe a loved one. Do you do this stuff in the relationship because you need to do it, or do you do it because you love the person? The obedience God calls us to is obedience abided in love and in a relationship. But for that to happen, there needs to be something in you, a decision, a starting point of the journey, and that point is trust. You have to trust God. So imagine you're hanging off a cliff, a berg. You're hanging. And from the bottom, God tells you, let go, I'll catch you. And you're like, no, but I'm waiting for someone on top. Obedience is trusting that when God tells you to let go and fall off the cliff, that He will catch you. What would you do? What do you do when you feel like your life is at a point where you're hanging off a cliff and God is telling you to let go? Are you clinging and hoping for someone else to come through? Or are you trusting God to catch there? Adam and Eve disobeyed God because they didn't trust God wanted the best for them. It's a bit different than Adam and Eve disobeyed because the snake came and said, here's an apple, have it. No. They disobeyed God because they didn't trust God that what He has given them is the best for them. Then on the other hand, you've got a guy like Abraham who was willing to sacrifice Isaac, his son, because he trusted God completely. Trusting God means that you believe that His ways are higher than your ways. Isaiah 55, verse 8 to 9, we read, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." It's about trusting God. It's about trusting God that what He knows and wants for you is better than what you think you know and you think you want. Trust is a difficult one because we normally grow up to a point where people disappoint you and then you don't trust them anymore, and that leads to you not trusting God. And then you praise for something and God knows it's not what you need, it's not the best for you, but you wanted it. And then you stop trusting God. But God's ways, God's thoughts are better, are higher than us. And then if you can start with this journey of obedience, the nice thing about it, it leads to a transformation. It leads to a metamorphosis of your spiritual life, maybe of your entire life. And one of the most beautiful, or some of the most beautiful testimonies you will hear about people who chose to trust and out of the trust started to being obedient will be so beautiful if you listen to it. Some people who have struggled with marriages, people who struggled with parenting, people who struggle in ministry, wondering why things don't seem to work out. If you're a follower of Jesus and you're maybe struggling in your marriage, struggling with parenting, struggling at your work with relationships, maybe ask God, where's the area in your life where you're not trusting in Him, where you need to be obedient? Where's the place that obedience leads you to transform? For example, a man struggling with anger starts obeying God's word. He decides, okay, I'm struggling with anger. What does God teach me? What does His word guide me to do? What should I be obedient in? He starts practicing and choosing to be patient. who starts to practice forgiveness, starts to practice love, his heart and his relationship starts to change. This is a process. It's not always easy. We said that in the beginning of this series we're doing. But obedience is the pathway to grow, and it's a pathway to healing. But that calls for trust. And then there's another thing that people really don't like, and that is sacrifice, giving up stuff. Following God means laying down your life. Going to sound like a president now, but listen carefully now. Following God means laying down our will for His will. Do you understand that? Do you understand the implication of doing that sacrifice? It feels big. It is big. But boy, oh boy, is it worthy. It's worth it. You can ask many followers of Jesus. It's worth it. I think if you can time travel and go ask Paul and ask him all the suffering you went through, was it worth it? He will tell you it's worth it. You can read his letters. And that doesn't sound to me like a guy that felt his sacrifices weren't worth it. But Jesus also knew about sacrificing. That's why we're having communion today. Because that was a sacrifice. If you think a sacrifice is stop cursing, swearing, that's not a sacrifice, that's a change. Jesus prayed, Luke 22:42, Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done. Jesus knew that if he sacrificed, if he trusts God and obeys God and goes to the point of obedience, it will cost him everything. It will cost him his life. We sometimes forget that Jesus was fully human. And one of the most important instincts in a person and in the world is the instinct to try and survive. Imagine that wasn't part of humanity. We would never have been here. So Jesus had this thing in him about giving himself as a sacrifice. And he went to the Father and said, if it's possible, let this pass me. But if not, let your will be done, not my will. And obedience often means giving up something special, something we hold so close and dear to our personal life. Maybe it's your comfort. Maybe it's your plans for the future. Maybe it's your desires. Jaco Strydom is an awesome speaker and preacher from Gauteng. And he works a lot with homeless people, people addicted to drugs and stuff. And he once told a story about a family that moved to Hillbrow out of Sandton with 2 little children. And he asked him, but why did you move to Hillbrow? And they said, we could not move to Hillbrow because there is need. That's obedience. That's an example of being obedience and sacrificing. Sandton to Hillbrow. Will you be obedient if God asks you to move out of Durbanville to Mitchell's Plain? See Edna's face is like, but it's a journey. I told someone earlier the week when I did service here for Christ, I eventually got my driver's license. And the test you had to do to be a driver of the Combi was to go on a drive with a guy called Wilbur Wright. And he didn't worry about how you drive, and he was talking to you about how you are faithful in the small things. Because the small things grows into you being able to take on the bigger things. So sometimes you have to give up something small to move on, to be transformed to a newer you. And this stays a process. God's way always leads to a greater way. But for His will. Your vision for your life might be X, but God knows He made you for Y. A missionary who leaves his home to go spread the gospel, a business person who decides to do business, live with integrity, and not go for financial gains, or a parent who raises their child in faith despite all the pressure in society, all the challenges we face against our faith, but stick to teaching the children the truth that we get in the Word of God. The pressures of a church sticking to the truths of the Bible in a society that says you need to change. We don't need to change. We need to be obedient to God. And then the nicest one of all. So obedience brings joy. Just think about that random, hopefully you've had a time like that, where God told you to do something and you were like, I'm not sure about it. And then you do it and then you see what God did and that joy you get from it. So obedience has a reward. This reward is joy. Being obedient doesn't mean to lose joy. It means gaining joy. Psalm 119 verse 1 to 2 talks about you're blessed. You're blessed when you stay on course, walking steadily on the road revealed by God. You're blessed when you follow His directions, doing your best to find Him. That's the Message translation. I'm going to read it again. You are blessed when you stay on course, walking steadily in the road revealed by God. You are blessed when you follow His directions, doing your best to find Him. When you obey God, when you start following Jesus' command to follow Him and pick up your cross, you will start to experience peace. You will start to experience purpose. And in the end, you will experience fulfillment. There's a man in the Bible who went to a field and he discovered its hidden treasure. So what he did is he went and he sold everything and he bought the field so that he can have the treasure. It's one of the stories Jesus tells us. Matthew 13:44, we read, the kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again. And then in his joy went and sold it all. And when he did, he sold all he had and bought the field. Have you discovered the joy, the treasure that is available in obedience to God? Have you been willing to sell it all to claim that treasure? Is that maybe something in your part of metamorphosis, transforming your life, that you need to decide and say, okay, God, I choose to be obedient in everything, not just in what I'm comfortable, but in everything. Obedience to God, following His way, shapes your future. Any one of you seen the movie Gladiator, the first one, the real good one? Okay. More than once? More than thrice? Okay. Probably one of the best movies ever made, and one of the best quotes out of a movie ever in that. Where Maximus says, what you do in life echoes in eternity. What you do in life echoes in eternity. What echoes will your life be? Will your echoes be of a person living in obedience to him or herself? Or will your echoes be obedience to God, joy, peace, love, kindness, friendliness? Every act of obedience, no matter how small, is seen by God and carries eternal significance. Your one kind word to someone might be the reason that person doesn't do something to himself. A couple of years ago, I loved to journal at Cafe Grano. In the morning, go sit there, or in the afternoon, drink coffee and journal and read Bible there. But the one day I was sitting there, and I saw an elderly man come in and he bought his coffee and stuff. And I thought, oh, okay, nice. I do know something like I do. And when I walked out, I felt the Spirit tell me, pay his coffee. And I paid his coffee, and the Lindy, who still works at Cafe Grano, looked strange at me. Why are you paying his coffee? And the next day I went back to go do some more Bible study and drink some more coffee there. And the exact words to me, and I'm going to switch to Afrikaans now, JP, to quote it correctly there. She said, "Hi meneer, jy weet nie wat gister gebeur het nie. Toe ek vir daai oom sê sy koffie is betaal, toe bars hy in trane uit." I don't know why. I don't know if he came and said, today is my last coffee, I'm going to drink a good one. I've never seen him again, spoke to him, it doesn't matter. God asked me to be obedient to pay 20 Rand for an Americano. That's small things. Doesn't matter how small it is. What you do for God when you're obedient carries eternal significance. Our obedience now prepares us for what God has in store for us in the future. If you want to know what's in the future, you need to ask, am I obedient in the present? So let's ask ourselves 3 things before we wrap it up. Where is God calling us to obey today? Where's God calling you today to obey? What areas in your life do you need to surrender? How can we trust Him more fully? I'm going to give you a minute to just look at the 3 questions. Maybe try and memorize it and go think about it for the rest of the day when the power is off. Where is God calling you to obey today? What areas of our lives need surrender? And how can we trust Him more fully? So the next step is to do it. The sermon means nothing if it doesn't move to action. Obedience is not a state of mind, it's a state of doing. The thing is, God doesn't expect perfection. God desires a willing heart. God desires someone to take a step and then another step and then another step in obedience. Are you willing today to just say, God, I'll take one step at a time? If you think that someone going through rehab after a sports injury, you can maybe skulk about stuff like that. But if you go through an injury, you can't start running or lifting the weights you did before the injury. You take it step by step, increasing in flexibility, increasing in strength. And that's also the truth about obedience. Just start. Just take a step.